try, go ahead and move your nickel and your eyedropper and your cup out of the way. Mrs. Barr is going to come along and pick that up, because if I leave it there, you will continue to play with it.
He did it.
That's what we do with the students, I understand. And if I was sitting there, I would very well play with it as well. So now we need to go into the results. And the results are exactly what happened. Now, several of the students said, well, so-and-so jiggled my desk. I'm like, well, then write that down. Tell me exactly. I was able to put X number of drops of water on the head of the nickel before it spilled over. Or if it was, like you got 40 drops on and it was secure, that 41st drop is the one that puts you over. And it's where and you need to be specific. I like words like water, nickel, head, and as I told the kids, they had to put their finger on each of those 3 words so they would make sure all of those words are in there. It's 3rd grade. I expect complete sentences, capital letters, punctuation. If you can get it right when you put it on this paper, when you transfer it over, it's much easier to do. Now, for this particular activity, you got one result because I had you do it one time. If you were doing this kind of activity at home, you could actually do it 4 or 5 or 6 times. List all of those results in your results. And then when you get into some of the illustration things I'm going to talk about in a minute, you can actually do different things with that information. So whatever you do, write it down. When you get to your conclusion, it's how do you tie in what you thought would happen to what actually happened. You have to bring in back to your hypothesis. What was that number that you wrote down in your hypothesis? And you have to bring that in to what actually happened. You might say, I thought I could get 14 drops of water on the head of a nickel before it spilled, comma, but I was actually able to achieve 42 drops. Or whatever your numbers were. And again, you don't have to use that word for word. But you need the idea down that I thought this would happen, that's not what happened. Or I thought I would get 40 drops of water on the head of the nickel. I achieved 40 drops of water on the head of the nickel. I was right. I knew what I was talking about. But your conclusion takes what you thought and what happened and ties them up into a nice little package. Which is always nice. It looks so pretty that way. Right, Dalton? Right. Now, if you were, as I said, if you were up into the upper level of junior high, high school, college, however far they go, they would expect a whole lot more details. But for 3rd grade, this is just now getting into it, this is your project. Now, when the kids did it, they were then told to take the paper with the squares on it, and they had to take every word that they wrote on their outline and transfer it over to their squares. I'm not going to have you do that tonight. I simply wanted to show you what the kids are doing when they bring theirs home, and some of you have seen them already. When they bring them home, that's where they got the information. They took this information and they just rewrote it onto here. I was then able to allow them to get a piece of construction, just a big piece of construction paper, and they do a trifold on it, and then they can fasten, and I just give them a glue stick to use, they fasten them directly onto this, and it's a little miniature display board. You may say, like, is there a certain format? Yes. You all picked up when you came in. It's right there. That this is how, and the kids have seen this, this is how all display boards should be set up. It should make sense to go through the problem, the hypothesis, the materials, your procedures in the middle, your results, and your conclusion is down here. I'm actually going to show you some of the ones that are here. These are ones that students have done in the past, and for whatever reason, they chose not to keep them, and I don't even know whose project this is. It wasn't in my class. They have all their information on here. Their problem, their hypothesis, the materials, the procedure, the results, and the conclusion. Now, they also came up with a title, and that makes sense to have, and that's on your paper. They also, one thing that I require of my students is that all the project boards have an illustration. Now, if you're going to a big science fair convention, one of the rules is that you may not have a person who the person who it belongs to, they may not have a picture of them on their board. Me, I'm just trying to get it so it's not boring. I don't want just words on here. Some of the kids take pictures of the activity happening and glue those on here. Some of the kids, and they're all different varieties, some of them simply draw it on there. And he actually took the paper that you have in front of you with the little squares on it. Now, is this person's grade going to be lower? Not necessarily, because a portion of the grade is neatness, but a larger portion of the grade is how well can the student get up and explain the project. Can they talk me through it? If mom and dad wants to help them, absolutely more power to you. Get involved with your child's learning. That's wonderful. Help them pick out a project if they haven't already chosen one, or if they're having trouble finding one. Be involved with that. But the child needs, and about half the grade, is how well does the child understand it. Part of the grade on this sheet is the actual stuff. Do they have the title? Do they have the materials? Is the purposes listed on here? But does the student understand it? Can they walk me through their thought process? Now, all the illustrations on here, some of them, this is one about how calcium builds bones. Here's a chicken bone, and then they take a chicken bone with calcium and no calcium, and they talk about what they can do with them. And they actually have pictures of the bones being flexed. Here's one that talks about friction, and it shows a picture of the child doing the activity. One of my students, the first year I did this, actually did not have his shirt on when he did the activity. He got to school, realized that his bare belly is showing on the picture, and took a permanent marker and colored in a shirt on the picture so that he would have a shirt on. But it has to have some sort of illustration. As I was talking earlier, if they have 4 or 5 or 6 pieces, like they've done it 4 or 5 or 6 times, they can create a nice graph or a nice chart that you can do on the computer or that you can do freehand. If you look to the back of the room over here, there's a couple of them. The one with the heart rate. Seth, can you open that up a little bit? Open up that one side. This is a 3rd grade student. Open up that on this side. His results, he had parent help, and that's wonderful. But the child could explain exactly what happened.
The child wouldn't be able to.
They can, yeah, they can.
Wouldn't be able to type all that like that.
Yes, they can. They can. If they have somebody who's showing them how, but they can do that, and they have a computer available. Over on the one that the taller one over there, it has a whole lot of data. Now, some of the students will need help, and if you want to type it for them, I don't have a problem with that. I want to know that the child understands the process start to finish. Now, I have told some of my students in my class that if I teach them science, that if they get it all on, borrow this for a second, if they get it all on this paper, they have it all concise, neat, and they bring it into the school, I will let them use the school computer to put all that up. If they bring their results on a piece of paper, 14 drops, 47 drops, 124 drops, I will help them figure out how to make a graph like that and even get it color-coded.
That's awesome.
Okay, we may have to spend some recess time, or I may even need to stay after school at some point to help them do that. But they can use the facilities here to create this.
That's cool that you're offering you time like that.
And I will, because I think that it's important that kids understand, sorry, let me get that back, understand the process start to finish and to have a finished product. Now, Mr. Wright and I actually teach around, and we have a teach other teachers how to do this with their students, because I think that it's very important how to teach, and as I said, that one's not even my student, but how to teach that process through start to finish. And we actually show these. So if you, at the end of the science fair project, you do not want to keep the board, you live in an apartment, you don't have room for it, I will be happy to adopt it. And as you, all different varieties, because we actually take these up and put them on display for other teachers to see, and they're the same thing as you. 3rd graders can do this?
Yeah, but it's great being able to see examples.
Right.
Once the kids get older, most of the teachers don't hold on to projects. Like the first time we did the country project, we were like, what?
Yeah.
We had an example. So.
Right. Well, and that's why I do this night. So many parents have a great deal of stress level when it comes to science fair. And then I tell them they can't do a volcano, and they're like, what? Then I tell them they can't do a solar system, they're like, what? So no models allowed. You have to ask a question and solve the question. Yes?
Do you have a suggestion as to where they can get creative ideas that are different?
Yes, I do, because this week, if your child has already had library, When they're in library this week, and my students haven't, but if they when they go to library, they are actually being handed, and I did not bring any of them with me, science fair books. And it's a book like a phone book, and we have about 30 of them, and the kids look through them. Oh, I like this one. So then they go over to Mrs. Cox, the librarian, who is phenomenal, by the way, with Miss Thompson in the library, and they write down, okay, so here's Dalton. He's in Miss Walker's class. He's book 6, page 42. So this weekend, Miss Thompson and Mrs. Cox will come in, and they will go, okay, wanted book on page 42, here's book 6, page 42, put it on the copy machine, copy that page, and next week they will hand it to your child to take home. That is one activity. Do you have to do that activity? Absolutely not. I had a child last year, who was last year? 2 years ago? 2 years ago, who had a parent who worked at the lab at the hospital. He was interested in, is a dog's mouth cleaner than a boy's mouth? His mom had got a couple of Petri dishes. They swabbed the dog's mouth, they swabbed the boy's mouth, and they watched the cultures grow. That was their question. They were able to follow it through. Parent interest tied into child project. Phenomenal. We've had students who have done activities about what kind of cushioning or insulation is the best for packaging materials. And they took those little Ziploc plastic containers, and they used paper towels, and they used the little egg styrofoam cartons, and they used confetti, and they used, I don't know, lots of different things. And then they put an egg in it and dropped it off the balcony. And they would see which one protected the egg and which one didn't. And they had pictures of the egg being secure on the ground inside of some of the containers, and of some of them that busted all over the place. And so it's all about finding something that interests you, that you can ask a question about. I will tell you, do not bring a solar system in, do not bring a volcano in. Also, you're not going to bring in any item. All we want are pictures. We don't want to have to clean up any mess. We don't want to have to be responsible for anything that's lost. I'm going to walk over here for just a minute. This student was talking about what it takes to break a lock. They attached the lock. Did this work? Absolutely. But they don't need a broken lock at home anymore. So they took, they took the lock, put it in, somehow figured out a way to fasten it to the board, and then that was fine. If you're doing a project about a lock, though, don't draw me a picture of a basketball, because that won't make sense. The illustration needs to tie in directly to whatever the project is. You can get magazine pictures, you can get drawings, you can make your own drawings, whatever works for you. Yes?
You were saying that you wanted to make sure that each child understood the procedure, and that was a real important part of it.
It is.
So they're due on March 13th, and are the kids going to present them to one another?
They're going to present them to their class. They actually have to stand up just like this, and they're going to explain their project to a room full of third graders.
It'd be a good idea to practice.
That would probably be a good idea, because that is a good portion of the grade. Now, different teachers are going to be doing it slightly different. There's a project grade, or they're going to use it as a test grade, depending upon how that teacher scores. This is actually going to be on fourth quarter grades, because third quarter ends 2 weeks before that. And they're going to be on display during parent-teacher conferences downstairs in the gym. So we'll have them set up by class on tables, very similar to this, probably these tables, have them set up, and you can, just like this, and you could go around and see not only what your child did, but what everybody else's did. The grade will not be on here. The grade will come later. Each student will get a medal for participating, a scientific, very cool medal, and they're also going to get an award for you to keep in a scrapbook. And it will tell you what the child's project was and when they did it. And because for me it's important in taking pride in what you do, but let's do something that's worth taking pride in.
Positive reinforcement.
Absolutely, absolutely.
Is there going to be any kind of like a timeline for you as far as checking with the kids to make
March 13th.
That's when it's due, right?
Yes, I don't do,
Before
no.
You're not going to say, or, you know.
I will ask and inquire, but nothing formal.
Okay.
I won't say, okay, bring me your outline and let me see what you're doing.
Okay.
Because some of the projects, as you just saw with the nickel and the water one, I'm going to go back over here. Some of the projects take an hour. Some of the projects you're going to want to do where you do a plant study with the sunlight hitting it, or you might be doing something that you have to wait for a certain weekend to go someplace, or those kinds of things. So everybody's different. Everybody's different. If you have any questions at any time, feel free to call me or email me or write a note in your child agenda and have them bring it to me or send me a note. I will answer individual questions at that point. Any other questions now? We're going to sell display boards in just a minute. We don't have any of the small ones left. All we have left are the tall ones, and they're $2 a piece. Yes?
Which was cleaner?
Which was cleaner? Do you remember?
It was a dog.
I think it was the dog's mouth. Yeah.
Good enough.
Yeah. Well, if you have any questions, I'll be here. Otherwise, we have the boards for sale, and then we're good to go.